As clinicians, when we talk trauma, we talk about any moment in time where there's, big emotions, lots of things happening,
Mhm.
where the system doesn't feel like it can handle it all.
Depending on how you handled those past traumas, it's going to be a likely predictor in how do you handle the current situation that's similar to it.
Perhaps trauma is the cause, or at least the forerunner, of things such as depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues.
Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of The Lighter Side of Heavy Things with me, Chris Clark, accompanied with our co-host here, Dwayne Horton. And anyways, today we're looking at delving into a really interesting and I think really important topic. And that's kind of in regards to trauma. This isn't going to be all encompassing, and we're actually thinking of probably doing this in several different parts.
Oh yeah, that's way too complex to do one.
Yeah. But yeah, starting off, as we were thinking about ways we could go about talking regarding this topic, we liked the idea of bringing in the idea of kind of what is trauma and defining what are we hear about big T traumas, little T traumas. What are those? What do they look like? And yeah, so what are your thoughts, Dwayne?
Well, I think trauma, I agree with you. Trauma is probably one of the most talked about things in therapy. Like, I do not remember the last time I had a client come in and not say the words "I was traumatized" or right, or I wonder if I have PTSD, or so forth, and rightfully so. But in a lot of regards, I think this is also where the whole profession as a whole is going. It's a psychology, is the idea of what trauma is and how that affects us, and it builds off of our topic last time. So trauma, in essence, is really, clinically speaking, as clinicians, when we talk trauma, we talk about any moment in time where there's, big emotions, lots of things happening, where the system doesn't feel like it can handle it all, right?
Right.
Where it feels so overwhelming that the body just kind of does something to protect itself.
Yeah.
And so, and that's where it's kind of like we just get frozen, right? Frozen in time. Traditionally speaking, there's all the different forms of, big things that people think about. So if we're going to separate a big T, little t, so big trauma, little trauma, people are looking at all the different various ways that people hurt other people, and different ways that there has been, like violence, natural disasters, wars, but I mean, lots of things like car accidents. Those are often associated with big T's. Even accidents on the workforce, things like that.
Yeah. And I think something that's kind of interesting too as we get along that topic, when you're mentioning the clinical ideas surrounding that, I think what's crazy is even the expansion upon those ideas, because I feel like before, when first discussing trauma, right, if we look back in history, it started out with kind of those ideas of shell shock, right? Some of those first times, I think it was following World War I, where you had troops coming home and they were displaying a lot of what we would say are classical PTSD symptoms, but it was associated with war, right, and with soldiers. And as time has gone on, that understanding has definitely become, I feel, some people say broadened, but I don't think it was broadened. I think it was better understood that, this isn't something that just affects, for example, a soldier, but it can affect your run-of-the-mill soccer mom, right? Who might have been involved in some sort of serious catastrophe in her life. She can exhibit those very same life-altering symptoms.
Well, and they're passed down generationally too.
Yeah.
Right. Generational trauma is a very big thing, and I think that's why. I mean, when you think about it logically, to me, it's like, well, duh, of course we should talk about trauma.
Yeah. Or that idea of like, duh, that is trauma.
Yeah, right? Exactly, right? It's like, come on, like, life sucks. Did you not know this? Like, so of course it's going to affect generationally. Like, I mean, like, the year we got married, Sarah and I got married, it was 2005. And that we went back to New Orleans where my family's from. And, a few months later, they had Katrina, and we still talk about the effects of Katrina today,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, Hurricane Katrina damaged and destroyed a city I loved. And generationally now, we're talking at least one generation from that.
Mm-hmm.
People still are affected by it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, well, duh, life sucks. Of course it's going to hurt.
Right. And you know what I think is even interesting is that, as you mentioned, with that generational trauma, for example, like with my Native American heritage, my dad, for example, um, he was part of that generation of the boarding school where they got shipped off to these boarding schools. They were beaten for not speaking English. If they tried to speak in their native language, and all sorts of things that happened there. And even though I feel like my dad wouldn't admit it, right, necessarily, but it's interesting seeing how that had affected the next generation. Because for me, for example, um, well, not only just me, but my siblings as well, being one generation removed from my dad who had that experience in the boarding school. Um, he would teach us some Navajo and speak it with us every once in a while, but it definitely wasn't. I feel as much as it should have been. But honestly, I can understand where he maybe felt like he was trying to protect us from not having to go through the persecution and stuff that he went through just because of who he was in his culture.
Right. Well, I mean, like you said, he became him through those terrible experiences, right?
Right.
Because he became who he was, how he parented probably shifted
Mm-hmm.
and changed. And clinically speaking, I mean, we talk about this at least daily, several times a week. Like we're all like trauma's everywhere.
Uh-huh.
And so, and the person going back to the World War, it was Bessel van der Kolk, who Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score. He is the man who kind of came up with the clinical term post-traumatic stress disorder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And through his work at the VA, and yeah, people didn't know. So it's like what you're saying is true. What we know about trauma is like we're barely scratching the surface of how impactful that is, and what life looks like. Now, that for a lot of people, people are like, oh, PTSD, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, it's okay, I promise.
Yeah.
It's not the boogeyman who's going to jump out and get you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not trying to minimize people's experiences of it. It can be pretty severe.
Yeah.
But
life altering.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's get like a concrete example. Do you want to give an example? You want me to give an example? Well, like a big T, little T, anything. It doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, I guess, for example, right, if we're keeping it on the lighter side of those heavy things. Do
we need a warning on this one?
No, this one's nothing crazy. But, I think, for example, I guess you could equate it to the idea, I guess we want to say, of a big T, because it definitely not only altered my daily life in certain ways regarding the way that I chose to maybe make food choices or other things like that, but it definitely, made me look at certain objects or things within my house a little bit differently too. And I've told you this story already, but there was this incident happened several years ago, and I ended up my wife and I had some pizza from a place, and we came home, got our kids in bed, and as we were getting our kids in bed, this is a few hours after we had eaten this pizza at this event, but all of a sudden, I'm not feeling too good. My wife's not feeling too good. She decides that she's going to go to bed and hopefully maybe sleep it off. I'm thinking, well, I'll just kind of stay up maybe just for a little bit and see if it goes away. Well, it didn't go away. I ended up, becoming really good friends with that toilet downstairs, and
Oh,
I could,
toilet. Only you know what I'm going through.
yeah. No, I mean seriously, there were I was dying. I was like sweating profusely. I couldn't get cool, and I remember putting my head against the side of that toilet and puking my guts out for hours, and then all of a sudden going from not only it being too hot, all of a sudden being really cold, and I could feel my bones, and it was terrible. And my poor wife upstairs, I could hear she was going through the exact same thing. And I can tell you what, ever since that incident, my wife and I have never ever eaten again at that particular pizza place, and this has been like 7 years, um, and that was a quote unquote big T in a very certain way, right?
Very certain way, like that was trauma. Like there was nothing you could do. Like if there was an off switch to like pain go away, like you would have done that a long time ago.
Oh yeah. Like I remember sitting there thinking, like if I were to die right now, it wouldn't be so bad. Like just hurting everywhere in my body. Those stomach pains, like, and not only that, but remember my entire back hurting from how hard I was throwing up, like just terrible.
Oh yeah, that is funny. And now even the smell of it probably bothers you.
Yes, because this particular pizza place has a particular dipping sauce, and that smell, even to this day, if I smell anything close to that, I get a little bit of heartburn starting to, that feeling in my throat builds up, and I just, I can't. And I'm sure if someone were to place any pizza from this joint in front of me today, I would say no.
No.
I would pass it up.
So now your kids don't get the joy of eating that pizza.
Yeah, my kids will never know the joy of eating from that pizza place.
You created generational trauma.
That's right. That's right.
That's funny. But what's interesting, like you said, like there's a somatic piece that goes to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is trauma? Can logically, you're a logical person.
Yeah.
Can you be like, okay, I know that was just a fluke experience. There was probably something contaminated on it, right?
Well, yeah, because the entire logical piece that comes in is a week later, we ended up seeing in a news report that the pineapple that was used on this particular pizza at this particular pizza place was being recalled because it was contaminated. So logically, yes, I know that we had a bad batch, on that pizza.
But you can't get your body to be like,
right,
it's not a big deal.
Which I think comes back to that idea of the somatic thing, which I don't know if people understand too much about that. So I guess how would you explain what does that mean when we talk about the somatic piece of trauma?
Well, somatic is like kind of any physiological experience that comes up within us. Like for you, like in this very instance, is the idea of like just even thinking about smelling it, right? I mean, it's like, oh man, there are so many funny movie quotes going through my head right now. Like there's a part of Get Smart where, it's like when I think about blood, when I smell blood, right, I faint, right? Like if you think about it, if you smell it, you're like, I'm going to throw up.
Oh yeah.
Like, let's change topics, Dwayne. It might be funny on air.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what that would do, but there's that. So somatic is a physiological response internally. Sometimes it's like anxiety. Sometimes it's like a tension in the chest.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's a churning stomach. But there's that somatic piece that hits you. That no matter how hard you think about it, it's like your brain doesn't have the ability to turn that piece off and say it's not a big deal.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is it kind of builds on itself, right? So there's a very important part of trauma that's important in here too for people to understand that how our memories work. It builds on a neuroplastic principle, right?
Right.
Neuroplastic principle means that everything builds on itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's plastic in the sense that it's adaptable and changeable, right?
Right.
And how I describe this principle to my clients is like take I don't know, let's do hot. I can do hot today. Like, Why do toddlers, you say, put a hot pan down on the ground on the table and say, don't touch this? It's hot. The toddler's going to touch it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to stop them, because there's nothing inherent in the word hot that's going to make any difference in that.
Right. Or tell them, don't touch that. You're going to cut yourself.
Right? Like, what does cut mean? That sounds fun. Hey, there's things that need to have that experience, right? And so, I mean, cut's a good one, because say they cut their hand on like a little knife, then they have like a plastic, knife in their toy kitchens, like my daughters had. And then they're afraid to touch that because it's sharp. It's going to cut them. And then they become overly sensitized because it's building on the past experiences. Like with your pizza thing, that whole pizza thing, probably like all pizza was probably off limits for a while.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. But cognitively, you're able to work around toward other pizzas.
Yep. Yes. Other pizza is fine. Just not from this one place.
Just not that one place, right?
Yeah. But there was, a few months where I could not really do pizza at all.
And this is how, building off last week's experience, the conversation was, we become us through experiences like this daily. I mean, when I was young, there were experiences that came up in my life. Like, my dad had a look on his face. Like, I love and honor my dad. He's an incredible man. You know my dad. Incredible man. And my parents, I was a tough child. I say that, but I can't emphasize that enough. I was a tough child. And it's not bad for me. But I remember as a kid that there was a certain look that my dad would get on his face. And it would be like, oh, man, I'm in trouble. What did I do? And like, and the worst part is, I think that's generational. My oldest will now, I guess even my youngest now, will look at me when I'm just sitting there, and they're like, uh-oh, Dad, what's wrong? I don't know. You got to look. Do I? Like, maybe I've got a bad case of RBF, but...
A bad case of something.
Bad case of something. They're like, "Ooh, don't be near Dad right now."
Well, I'm sure that probably hits a chord with many of our viewers. I'm sure that they're, growing up, you knew when either mom, dad, or whoever was not in a good mood, and you knew the subtle things to pick up on to say, nope, you stay away.
Yeah.
But again, that's how you kept yourself safe.
Right.
Which I think comes back to that trauma, or that idea that we talk about with trauma, that, with the neuroplasticity or things that we are trying to understand. Well, this new thing's been introduced into my world that did not make me feel safe or actually really hurt. How do I work around this now to try to make life even manageable?
Right. Well, and there's a kind of truth to that. Like, I tried to do good, but I'm very impulsive, as you know. And sometimes you do things impulsively. And I don't even know if I should admit this one. That look. So to do kind of our trauma treatment that we do EMDR, eye movement desensitization, reprocessing, right? We do that form of therapy. And in order to do it, you have to experience it, right?
Yes.
As part of the training, right? Well, my dad's look came up in my mind, and it really softened it for me, right? It was pretty miraculous. But so I was, going through a memory where that look was a part of it. And I remember that experience was kind of almost surreal, because like, oh, I now see why I was anxious here at later dates in my life, because from that one, I think I was like 4 in that memory. I think I was jumping up to teenager. And one of the memories that came up, I was embarrassed to admit it, but my uncle and my aunt and uncle and family from Louisiana came up and were hanging out with us. And my dad, I guarantee, has no idea that this even happened or remembers it. But I remember, like me, I was a young teenager, and my cousin Ashley and I, we were boys and we're doing stupid things. Well, I remember sitting in the front room, and It just so happened that a picture was taken at this moment, and I ripped a good one, and it like the whole thing stunk. And my uncle was proud of me. I remember that look in the picture, and I remember my cousin like, oh, and I'm like thinking I was proud of myself. And then I remember glancing over at my dad, and I have it on picture somewhere. I'm looking at my dad's face in that, and I was like, oh, there's that look. I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, oh crap!
I'm a dead
What did
man.
I do?
Yeah.
And I always wanted to make my dad proud, but then you see that look like, oh.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting is you bring this up that I think is an interesting development when it comes to trauma, because I feel like classically a lot of people feel or have felt that, if you are to be affected by trauma, it's a one-off event.
Right.
Something big that happens. But our understanding has expanded even more in understanding that oftentimes in many of these things that that affects us even in a traumatic way can be repetitive,
right,
frequently, again and again and again and again. In some serious cases it can be like neglect or other stuff like that.
Right.
That's terrible. But it could also be as simple as you said, that look, right?
Right. Exactly. Well, exactly. Like it was that look. That was a little T trauma. Like my dad didn't hurt me,
Mm-hmm.
right? My dad didn't, he was very good. Like my parents were very good. But for whatever reason, because like I was born anxious, I say that every time. When you're anxious, you see the world differently,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the middle of a panic attack, right?
Right.
When I was young, I'm sure my dad, in one of the memories I was talking about that I was reprocessing, I looked at my dad and said, oh my crap, my dad's not anxious or disappointed in me in that moment. He's not angry at me. I remember having this very distinct thought, that's a dad. That's like, what the crap do I do with this kid? Like, I love him. How do I help him?
Yeah.
But like, I would get so upset and worked up because my anxiety was intense. He had no idea what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, back in there, God, that was in the 80s. Like, we didn't talk anxiety, depression like we do nowadays.
No.
Right? It was like,
you got the knock it off, right?
Knock it off, suck it up. Like, impulsivity was not acceptable.
Yeah.
Why'd you do that? I don't know. There's a story. I only have vague recollections of this. Like, I don't remember exactly what I did, but I've heard this story since. My parents were painting the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I knocked over a bunch of cans of paint in the hall or something in the little walkway.
Oh.
And I remember my grandpa and grandma coming picking me up. And I remember in later time my parents said, yes, Dwayne, it was a good thing your grandpa and grandma came and picked you up. I'm not sure you'd be alive today.
Yeah.
Love you, Mom and Dad. I'm not spilling family secrets.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's interesting because a lot of that all comes back to that idea of safety.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, again, coming back again to that, what makes us, right? I mean, I like to be safe. I don't like to always be worried about something bad happening. And so I'm going to learn very quickly what is safe, what keeps me safe, what helps life go by in the less or the least stressful way possible for me. And the sad thing is that those, I guess you could say trauma moments, right, whether they're big T or little t, will come up and they end up being those speed bumps that we end up having to find a workaround to get through. And sometimes those workarounds, they might not cause too much of an issue, but sometimes they're really big.
Or they might not cause a big issue until they do, right?
That's true.
Like how you learn to cope was effective when I was 4 and 5. But when I'm, 40, it's not going to be the same way, right?
Right.
People like it like, oh, man, like you get ostracized if you did that, right?
Right. You can't sit down and watch the Flintstones and eat cereal on the floor,
It's
to zone out.
And the shag carpet on the floor.
Yeah, seeing a 40-year-old doing that in his underwear is not as acceptable as a 4-year-old.
I don't even think I want to see a 40-year-old doing that. That's why we don't have mirrors in my home. But no, but see, like, that's that neuroplastic principle. I remember as a young kid, my dad looking at me, and that was like, oh, I am bad, and that's what that equated to, right? And then later on, that built into like another thing that came up. That look came in, and that's a kind of a reinforcing that belief, and then it that blades out into school, into the community, into workplaces. I always have this drive to do good, but then you're going to fall short because I'm impulsive or I do stupid things, right? But those are those little T moments that build on that neuroplastic principle. But what the problem that people get stuck on is, and it's, I know this is a source of frustration for both of us, is yes, this is how we become us. But partly why things hurt now the way they hurt. So now I'm like, I don't know, I'm 40 something too. And I'm in this moment, I'm starting to react a similar way as I did back then. I start saying, why am I so stupid in doing that? Well, it's because that's how my brain has learned to program. These things come up. You start responding this way. Mm-hmm. But also because the body doesn't realize that that's dead. That moment in the past is the past.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of treatment, of therapy, of EMDR especially, is that it helps leave those things in the past. So the past is not affecting the present.
Right. Because like you said, you run into problems now. I mean, we all do, right? We're all going to run into issues, problems, or things of that nature. But if we let that negative belief or whatever it might be about ourselves, right? I'm bad, I'm stupid. Mm-hmm. Then you're not going to, you're going to jump back into that old line of thinking, mm-hmm. which, again, when you're 14, you might not have as much to worry about. But when you're older, as an adult, with more responsibilities and you need to get things figured out and you get stuck, that can be a big problem.
Right. And it does. And the people's wheels spin. And then they start that whole critical thinking, like, it's interesting when you bring it up in therapy and you hear some horrible things, right?
Oh, yeah.
And when you hear it and they're like, but that's stupid. That happened like 40 years ago. And my mind's always like, well, how's it affecting you now? Mm-hmm. If it's so stupid, why am I getting such an adverse reaction? And something often, if I could get my clients to settle down, is that they start to discover what piece hurts still in them, mm-hmm. where it hurts. Mm-hmm. And then we start, there's methods to deal with that. But trauma is such a big thing, just because naturally, whether you like it or not, someone's going to fall and break an arm, Yep. You're going to get hit in the head with a rock, mm-hmm. Car accidents are inevitable.
Yep. If you cook, you're eventually going to cut your finger.
Yeah.
At some point.
Your kid will roll his eyes at you.
Yeah. Yep. You will have a bad day at work.
Exactly. You will be accused of something you didn't do, mm-hmm. right?
And depending on how you handled those past traumas, it's going to be a likely predictor in how do you handle the current situation that's similar to it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's the important part of the plastic principle. The best part is that you can help rework that.
Yeah.
It's not always just like, Hollywoodized, flashbacks and nightmares. Those definitely are symptoms of PTSD. Mm-hmm. But that's not the big part of it.
No. I think that people do tend to overlook a lot of that, especially if they're affected by it, because, again, they do have some of those thoughts or feelings that if it's not like they see it in a movie or a TV show, then they're good.
Right.
Not everyone's going to be having a flashback. Not everyone's going to be having some sort of intrusive memory or other things. There's other stuff we look at when it comes to trauma. Are you avoiding those internal, external types of cues. Does it cause you to perhaps get really anxious? Does it cause you to, become depressed? Does it cause you to become irritable?
Right. Absolutely. What you brought up a huge point I didn't even think about bringing up today, but it's a great point there, is the idea of um, perhaps trauma is the cause or at least the forerunner of things such as depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. Because that's how they had handled their situation. Maybe in order to avoid, being shamed, they isolated.
Yep.
Maybe instead of, in order to avoid, talking and engaging with people because you had this bad experience, you sit on your room or you're on the computer playing all the time.
Yeah. Or perhaps maybe to prevent something bad from happening, you now must require complete and total control of everything in all situations, whether it's planning or putting something together or anything. So you can't ask for help.
Right.
Right. It's all on you.
Yes. If you feel alone, yeah, it's all on you. Maybe that's what you learned as young. That I learned that I had to be there always for myself because other people would fail me. It doesn't mean that people didn't care about them, and it didn't mean necessarily that people failed them. But again, look, take that as like that's the resource that they used to cope with their issues. So they became very independent, right? They they make sure they do well in school. They're hyper vigilant about deadlines and get things done ahead of time. They are responsive in class. They pay attention. They are respectful to their peers and to the leaders, and all these very pro-social behaviors. Why? Because, as you said, it might lead to safety. It could lead to choice. Um, they realize that doing these things gives them more options, that they can do whatever they want in life. But it leads to a path of success. But in order to be always on that page as in high school, even in college, it's okay because life becomes more contained, more controlled. But then as people age, those same pro-social skills will benefit them in many parts of their lives. But as getting older, and as I'm getting older, it's like you learn you have a lot less control than what you once thought you had. And so the idea of seeking control, therefore, perpetuates the anxiety.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, as you get older, you start to have more to worry about.
Yeah.
Right?
Social media, AI.
Yeah. Well, kids, if you have kids, or typically
yes.
you're in relationships in some way, shape, or form, your job, bills, other things like that. There's so much that ends up getting piled on that you really can't control. And then eventually what's going to happen?
Right.
That tool that was useful no longer becomes useful, and now you feel like you're back at square one, and that's not a good feeling.
Why? Because square one still hurts, where you learn how to deal with it, right?
Right.
And as you're saying, these are precursors, but potentially, hypothetically, right, of anxiety, depression. I could tell you from my own experiences of reprocessing memories. The very first memory I reprocessed, I remember very distinctly thinking, "Holy crap, where did my anxiety go?" Like if I could have quantified it and put it I would say at least 10 to 15% of my anxiety that was normally experienced every day was suddenly gone. I'm like, whoa, that's insane.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was 3 years ago this week that I did that.
Yeah.
And it's still gone.
Well, and I think what's interesting, because I've worked with many clients regarding these different things, and what I always find is following some of those earlier on points, especially for utilizing EMDR, and we work through that, how many of them will often make some sort of remark regarding how they feel like that burden's been lessened, right? Like the weight's been taken away, and they didn't even realize that how big that emotional weight was.
Right.
But I feel like there is so much more for us to dive into and talk more
Absolutely.
about, and I think that we will. But I feel like for today, um, I think we've done a pretty good job, perhaps, in explaining what trauma, big T, little t is, and we'll probably talk more about it.
Absolutely, because it's such a integral part of every person's life.
Mm-hmm.
Every person is going to experience it on one level or another. Not all the same, but it is, and it is a. But it also explains why we become us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, it will explain that, and it will also help people learn to be more gentle with themselves when they realize how much they tried to do good, or
Oh
how much
yeah.
they tried to do things right. Um, so this will absolutely be a big part of it. But you're right. Um, as far as what big T's and little T's are, they play off that neuroplastic principle. It's how we interact with the world. How that interaction then influences the way we respond to the world in similar situations later on differently.
Right. Because it either is going to feed into the beliefs that we have regarding ourselves or the world in a positive or a negative way. And if we
Mm-hmm.
already have negative ones, it only reinforces them even more.
Right. And so, but till next time, this will be fun.
Yeah.
So,
We'll see you all later.
yep.